Welcome to Racial Healing, the place to talk about race. I'm your hostess, Sharon Davis, Executive Director of the National Resource Center for Racial Healing, headquartered right here in Battle Creek, Michigan. We're delighted that you've agreed to join us again today. You know, part of our mission is to provide easy access and acquisition to ways to continue our journey in the healing of racism. Our vision is that we do see a world where all members of our human family live the oneness of humankind, and that all of us are free from all forms of racial conditioning. Part of our core values, as you may already know, is that we know that the true spirit of who we are as human beings is one of being loving and compassionate people. And we also know that we learned our way into this hot mess of racism and that we will intentionally learn our way out of it. And that's in part what this program is all about. We also know that any person, regardless of background or culture, can exhibit racial conditioning, and that it's not the responsibility of any one particular cultural group to fix this mess that we're in. It's all of us, for all of us to be at a place where we can live free of tension about this undercurrent related to race. So I'm delighted to welcome you today and know that racial healing is possible. It happens every day. And that we can live the life we want that's free of this tension of racial healing. It's absolutely doable, and that the answer is within each of us, and each of us will be able to heal through racial conditioning. Well, I'm delighted also today to introduce a two-part series. The first part is going to be about leadership, and we are just delighted to be able to have Arlin Ness, who is the past President and CEO of Star Commonwealth, and Joe Stewart, who is the President of Stewart Industries here in Battle Creek. And these two have done a tremendous amount of work and sharing of what the healing of racism is about to them. This is a rare occasion to hear two giants of leaders talk about parts of their journey as it relates to the healing of racism and racial conditioning. So, without any further ado, let's hear what Arlin Ness and Joe Stewart jointly have to say about the healing of racism and their journey, especially in leadership. Good morning. Hi, Arlin. How are you today?
Yeah, good morning, Sharon.
And how about you, Joe?
I'm fine, Sharon.
It's great
being here.
Oh, it's great to have you both here. Well, you know, you two have a long history as leaders in the healing of racism. And I'm very, very curious, and so are our listeners, about how that started. How did that start? Any one of you can jump in any time. How did you get interested in the healing of racism, of all things?
I got exposed through Star Commonwealth and Arlin Ness and his team, people who had been exposed to Nathan Rutstein and had been touched by Nathan's message about the oneness of humankind. And they took the initiative to come to people in Battle Creek to say, we need to have this experience. We need to have this experience. And when they did that, they got the support of the major corporations and the major philanthropic community to cover the cost of having Nathan come back here and put on seminars, Institute for the Healing of Racism. And that was what I got involved in. That was my first experience.
Well, people talk about racism all the time. It's been here forever, it seems like. Not that it started out that way. We do know a period of time in history where racism wasn't a factor. But why at that time? What was that defining moment that you said, Joe, this is something that I need to look into further?
You know, I don't think healing is something you say. Healing is something you feel. And I had been, I think, for a long time looking for something that would bring me out of the 60s and land me where I was in life. And it was that experience with Star Commonwealth and Arlin Ness and Marty Mitchell and his team that started me on this healing journey that I now understand.
I think, Joe, the experience when you ask that question, Sharon, it's really a journey of a transformation. I can remember that I was given the book by Nathan Rutstein by my executive team, and it laid on my desk for about 2 or 3 weeks. And they'd asked me if I would read it, And I would keep moving the book around. And finally, I decided on one Saturday morning, if I didn't read this book finally, they're going to be at this all the time. So I ended up sitting down, reading the book, and I didn't set it down until I had finished it. But I remember so well because my wife, Barb, started to walk through the living room when I was about 3/4 away through this book, and I was sitting there with tears running down my cheeks. And she says, well, what? She says, what are you reading? And I said, I'm reading a book on racism. And she says, and you're crying. I said, I am racist. And it was almost one of those experiences that you had to face yourself. And the book had that much power for me by forcing me to look at myself, because up until that time I was really promoting programs and bringing in people to talk about diversity and or tolerance and all of those types of experiences. And I thought I was doing everything right. And I certainly wasn't racist. I certainly wasn't prejudiced. I read the book, and the more I read the book, I even kept turning the book over to see if it wasn't written by an African American, but it was a white person. And I ended up finishing that book anyway. And since I believe so strongly in the philosophy of working with troubled children, which has been my professional career, that no one has a right to hurt anyone verbally or physically, and you're required to help, all of a sudden I had a new knowledge base. And my new knowledge base said, if you're going to not hurt and you're going to help, you're going to have to deal with racism. And you're going to have to deal with all the hurt that that produces, recognizing how we as white children have I would have to use the word ignorance in regard to how we become contaminated by racism by our culture.
Well, you all have said a lot in this very short period of time, because it sounds like that this is something that we as human beings can do after the 60s. And it's the what next after the 60s. And it might be even the what's next after diversity and tolerance. And we all know that these programs and things like that have been very good in many, many ways. You also referenced look at yourself, look within. Can you speak a little bit more about looking within and feelings?
Well, I think, Sharon, it's the transformation. This is not a case of just where you acquire a knowledge base, but it's something that when I say a transformation, almost a conversion type of experience that finally puts you at the spot to where you say, hey, I'm a part of the problem. But you also really begin to develop a tremendous, I'd use the word love, for for the human family. And you really look beyond color. And it's and when you see individuals as human beings, as not that they're African American, whether we're Latino, whether we're Caucasian, whether we're whatever it may be, that you're just looking at the individual. In fact, I have now been in the situation on more than one occasion where people in the meeting say, well, how many were African Americans there? And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know. That isn't what I did. I didn't count people, whatever race we were at. We were just there as a human family.
Well, this sounds a little different, though, Arlin, because there are people who would say, I'm colorblind. I don't see color at all, but they may not have gone through an experience or a journey about looking within. Is there a difference between those who would say, I'm colorblind, I don't see color, I don't see culture, and your experiences of what that means to you?
Sharon, let me, there was about 15, 20 years ago, there was a research project that was brown eyes, blue eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe perhaps our listeners know that research too. But just a few weeks ago, it was done again in a modest way. And it was little children that are 3 or 4 years old. It wasn't the 5th, 6th, and 7th graders and older. But the little children were asked the questions, for example, when they were looking at 3 children, which was the bad child? And white or black, the children would point to the black child. And
Right.
then they were asked the question, which is the attractive or the beautiful child? And they pointed to the white. Now, these are little 3-year-old children and 4 years old. These aren't children that have been raised on, have been born just with the idea in mind that I'm colorblind or that I'm aware of what color is attractive and not colored. They're already becoming indoctrinated. And we all became indoctrinated in some ways by our society, in regard to this. So whatever our race is, we've got an insidious type of cancer effect in regard to indoctrinating racism into our hearts. And so from that point, that's when I talk about the transformation. The heart has to change, just not the knowledge base.
There's a woman in Houston, Texas that says you've got to feel it to heal it. And if we can't feel
Amen
it,
to that.
we can't heal it. And these feelings, I think that's something, Joe, that you referenced a few minutes ago, to be, feeling this and coming out of the 60s. And we've had diversity and all of that. Joe, from your perspective, is there any one element about this healing of racism that really has touched your heart?
The fact that you do encounter people that are coming at this from the heart. From the heart. That's important. You asked a question about colorblind.
Yes.
The reason healing is so key to understand, we're talking about humanity, the heart of humanity. What's in a human? What make us tick? And if we start talking about colorblind, we're processing in the head. The head controls the eyes that see color. And as long as you see color, it's there. And color is real. Color is not only real, color is beautiful. We got to deal with the heart. The heart is the same color. And when we can process the oneness of humankind, I say like Sojourner Truth said when she said, "Ain't I a woman?" Mm-hmm. Healing from the heart is looking at another man, another person, and saying, "Ain't he or she a person?" And if we can accept a person as a person, and we as a person, then we can come closer to gripping the oneness of humankind. And there we can find love for one another. But as long as we are processing the differences rather than the sames, we keep having these difficulties in our healing process.
That healing can get really deep at times. I know that I've been on my own personal journey from the beginning as well. And it seems like it is a long journey. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it gets really hard to sort things out. I feel like I need to go back to a healing racism session periodically just to see what's in me that kind of drifts back in from time to time.
Oh, I think so, Sharon. It's almost like we need a Racism Anonymous group, like AA, because what you find is that you walk out of the healing racism sessions back into our society, and our society is involved in re-indoctrination. Mm-hmm. And so you get re-indoctrinated, and it's who you associate with. And, of course, we all associate with our society at large. And our society at large is constantly in a way of kind of re-indoctrinating, pulling you back into the old, whether it's myths, whether we want to call it some other name so that we feel comfortable, because we don't rather feel comfortable using racism, but we feel more comfortable using prejudice. But then we don't necessarily want to be prejudiced either. But so we all play these games, and our society plays these games. But Joe just mentioned about being in a conversation and the transformation of the heart.